This is Clear Politics. Hello! One of the most popular search queries over the past 6 months, the phrase migration crisis. Protests in Los Angeles are yet another sign that the migrant issue has become one of the main problems of the 21st century. And it's showing up more and more in violent street riots across different countries, an echo of the West's barbaric policies in the Middle East. Our world is looking more and more like a jungle, Europe grumbles. The most common campaign slogan of the past year, stop migration. First they invited them, now they're backing out. Political analysts say the migrant problem in the UK and EU is overdue for a solution. After the 2015 migration crisis, when several million people arrived in Germany alone, Europe endured for a long time, still trying to keep up appearances, despite an obviously worsening situation. As a result, last year politicians gave up, and this democracy and hospitality the European Parliament put into the Migration Pact.
The document tightens legal regulations for foreigners entering the EU and seeking asylum. It also creates filtering camps at the border for those without clear asylum rights in Europe to make their deportation from the Old World easier. The rules also simplify the process of expelling from European countries anyone denied asylum or residency.
At the same time, the rules adopted by the European Parliament introduce a mandatory quota system for distributing immigrants among EU countries. Countries with extra funds can reduce their quota by paying a penalty to the EU budget for each migrant they don't accept. The money from this will go towards strengthening European borders and migration camps. This point is opposed by right-wing politicians from Eastern Europe, where apparently new migrants will be redirected from more developed Western countries.
Naturally, some EU countries were shocked by this approach. Slovakia said it rejects the new migration policy, and Hungary responded even more harshly. Viktor Orban promised to fight the new migration rules imposed by the Soros empire with his hands, feet, and teeth, and not to allow migrant ghettos to be built on Hungarian soil.
And the next question is, where will the migrants go if the Poles, Hungarians, Czechs, and others refuse to take them? Here, let's look at the fact that Italy and Albania signed an agreement for migration camps to be set up in Albania. They've already built them there. They're gradually starting to fill up. And apparently, similar camps are planned for semi-recognized Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and possibly North Macedonia. Over time, such camps for migrants may even appear in Ukraine. European officials aren't even trying to hide any of this.
But more and more people keep arriving, and they behave differently too. On top of that, the economy is struggling, factories are closing, and even flagship companies are laying off thousands. So Europeans have plenty of their own problems and little motivation for sympathy or a warm welcome. Last year, in Germany, for example, there were proposals like these.
This is about the concept of remigration. Its author, Martin Sellner, leader of the radical identitarian movement, proposed deporting all migrants from the country. Even more moderate right-wing colleagues supported his proposal. The concept calls for deporting from Germany asylum seekers, foreigners with residency rights, and even citizens with immigrant roots who failed to assimilate. Up to 2 million people could be deported under these criteria. The final destination for such deportations could be North African countries.
In short, kick everyone out. That's modern European tolerance for you. Taking in millions of people seeking a better life out of compassion, even if promised, means putting a heavy burden on social budgets, which are already being cut for the sake of the Ukraine conflict. The British aren't far behind. During his short term as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak managed to propose a creative idea: send migrants to Rwanda. He called this plan an urgent national priority. Here's how the press described the process.
Members of the ruling Conservative Party, including current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, are considering sending illegal migrants to an African country, Rwanda. The two countries have already signed an agreement under which Rwanda would permanently accept migrants arriving in the UK via the Channel. In return, the UK paid £240 million in advance. However, not a single migrant has been deported under this program, as it was blocked by the European Court of Human Rights.
In spring 2024, the British Parliament finally passed the relevant law. They know how to count money here too. Housing asylum seekers, as Reuters notes, costs the country £8 million a day, so it's better to send them to Africa.
But this isn't the end. We saw that Keir Starmer was recently in Albania at a big European summit where he said, yes, we've given up on Rwanda, but now we're considering other options. Basically, as I understand it, they're talking about other countries where illegals could be sent while their applications are processed. Serbia, Albania, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina were mentioned. At one point, I even remember Armenia being mentioned. I wouldn't be surprised if once the fighting ends, Ukraine is considered too. Basically, these are like holding areas where illegals can be sent and forgotten about for a while, maybe even long term.
Last week, Northern Ireland was also caught up in anti-migrant protests. In the town of Ballymena, with a population just over 30,000, a fierce anti-migrant riot lasted several days. Locals were literally destroying the town.
The riot broke out after 2 Romanian teenagers tried to rape a local girl. What made things worse was that they got a lawyer and protection from local authorities. For several nights, houses and cars burned in the town, and there were clashes with police.
The locals' fatigue with newcomers is taking on a frightening tone.
On Wednesday night, hooligans attacked the house rented for years by Mila Koleva, a Bulgarian native, and her family in Ballymena, or rather used to rent. After what happened, Mila is seriously thinking about returning home. We know what's coming, so we just can't sit and wait for it to happen, she explains. I need to save my children. I have to protect them. She says there's real harassment of the house's residents on social media. It's gotten to the point where notes are being left on some houses indicating the resident's nationality. On some doors, you can already see signs like British family or Filipino lives here.
Real segregation. It sounds chilling, doesn't it? That's not far from lynch mobs. In the past 20 years, nearly 300,000 migrants have arrived in the region. Over 1,000 came to Ballymena, and the town has forgotten what peace is. Local officials compare the town to a boiling kettle because of the housing shortage and strain on public services. The scale of migration is shocking to residents.
It was under Boris Johnson that things really got out of control. In the COVID years, 2021, 2022, 2023, about 1.5 million new people were admitted. For a country of 65 million, that's a huge number. It's a huge strain on housing, healthcare, and just trying to absorb so many people who aren't English, obviously. There's even a term for it now, the Boris wave. The whole idea that we need to open borders because of COVID and boost the economy turned out to be wrong, because the economy didn't take off. In fact, for the last 20 years, basically since the 2008-2009 crisis, the British economy hasn't grown.
And this isn't just a short-term problem. Often, illegals from the Middle East don't want to assimilate. They don't learn the language, don't accept the culture, and religion is a whole separate issue. It leads to reverse racism, where locals get nothing and newcomers get everything. A clear example is British universities.
White British applicants have the lowest chance of getting into top universities compared to other races, writes the Daily Mail. The paper notes this is the first time such a situation has been recorded in the UK's history. The article's authors say this is due to the authorities' push to diversify the student body. Another factor, the paper says, is that universities must prove each year that they spend enough on supporting cultural diversity. As a result, according to the Daily Mail, the share of white students at top UK universities hovers around 10.5%.
In British schools, British children have actually become a minority.
In 72 English schools, there isn't a single white English child among the students. In another 454 schools, white children make up less than 2% of all students. In every fourth school, white children are a minority. These figures are from the Department for Education, cited by The Telegraph. I am convinced this is being done deliberately, systematically, and nationwide. What kind of assimilation or cultural exchange can there be when thousands of our children are in classes where white English kids are the exception, not the rule?
And there's another side effect for Britain. Illegals have become a kind of resource addiction for England, and it's not easy to quit.
The UK government plans to train 120,000 local builders, engineers, and caregivers to reduce dependence on foreign labor. Labour plans to spend £3 billion, $4.1 billion, to create 30,000 new jobs before the end of the parliamentary term.
But even the boldest experts say this process will take decades. London really felt the impact of migrant deportations in 2021, when the country ground to a halt for a month because the authorities couldn't find enough drivers for fuel tankers and other less pleasant trucks.
I believe solving these problems requires full respect for international humanitarian law and remembering the root causes. And those roots are in the policies Western countries have pursued for years. When the West met even minor resistance, it resorted to military adventures. That's how, under false pretenses, Iraq was bombed, Libya's statehood destroyed, and attacks on Syria carried out. All these and other Western adventures triggered unprecedented refugee flows. With all the steps now being discussed and taken, we must not forget where this started and who is to blame. So the main responsibility for resolving the migrant crisis lies with those who created the conditions for it.
We're ready for extreme measures. That's how the US president described events in the City of Angels, calling the protesters animals and saying they belong in jail. There's one important feature of the unrest in Los Angeles. The protesters are actually demanding that migrants and illegals be allowed to stay. Yes, California has its own trends.
Mass protests began on June 6th after immigration raids started. Special police began detaining and deporting people without legal documents. This sparked a huge wave of anger among Mexicans and other newcomers, leading to clashes with police.
The actions of the ICE people, as the police are called, angered even the city's mayor and the governor of California. Democratic politicians saw no problem with the peaceful protests. More precisely, they chose not to see it. As a result, Trump was forced to bring in the National Guard and Marines, for which he was immediately criticized by the Democrats. The U.S. president even called the unrest an attempt to start a civil war.
There are now more American troops in Los Angeles than in Iraq and Syria, writes ABC. In the American city, there are about 4,800 National Guardsmen and Marines, while in Iraq, there are 2,500 troops, and in Syria, 1,500. At the same time, due to the protests, the military will remain in Los Angeles for 60 days, said Pentagon Chief Hexat. And Trump emphasized that he would withdraw the National Guard from California only when the state is safe.
The Democrats' pet media paint the White House owner as a dictator and call the protests exclusively peaceful. You really have to be skilled to lie so brazenly.
We are now dealing with an administration that has made peaceful protesters its target, people who gathered to express their dissent. The president sends in the National Guard because he doesn't like these images of people protesting peacefully.
Meanwhile, cars are burning in the streets and rubber bullets are flying, even at journalists. But American law enforcement has its own rules, and no one in the West criticizes them for it.
Aggressive protesters, looking more like gangs in balaclavas and medical masks, began attacking police and throwing stones and Molotov cocktails at government buildings. All this started to strongly resemble the old BLM protests, one of the Democratic Party's tools, which would riot when it benefited the party.
Although overall, the reason for concern is indeed serious.
In recent years, the number of illegal border crossings between the U.S. and Mexico has sharply increased. In 2021-2023, 6.3 million people tried to enter the country illegally. Of these, 2.4 million were not deported but remained in the U.S. while their fate was decided.
Fighting illegal immigration is one of Trump's campaign promises and a key task for the new administration.
They took it seriously and already have results. The number of illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border has reached a record low, and the number of deported migrants has increased several times since Trump took office. On May 20th, The Washington Post reported that the Trump administration had developed a plan to deport hundreds of thousands of migrants, including more than 200,000 Ukrainians.
But what to do with legions of illegals? That's right, kick them out. Americans are following the trend too. The Washington Post leaked the White House's plans.
The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump is preparing to start transferring foreigners who are in the United States illegally to the U.S. military base at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, starting this week. The foreigners in question are from a number of countries. Among them are hundreds from friendly European countries, including the UK, Italy, France, Germany, Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Lithuania, Poland, Turkey, and Ukraine, as well as from other parts of the world, including many from Haiti, according to U.S. officials who wish to remain anonymous.
Let's recall that Guantanamo is a prison the U.S. supposedly closed about 10 years ago. Quite a prospect to leave for Los Angeles and end up there. Besides that, Trump intends to imprison illegal migrants in Alcatraz.
U.S. President Donald Trump is restoring the prison on Alcatraz Island to bring back America's former greatness. He can send illegal migrants and those who want to weaken America there. This was stated to AFRU by Konstantin Blokin, a research fellow at the Center for Security Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences and an American politics expert.
However, the migration crisis in the U.S. began under Biden. Trump is just trying to fix the situation. It all started in Texas in February 2020.
In February 2024, nearly 300,000 people crossed the Texas border. Many were let through by police who turned a blind eye. Because of this, the Texas governor declared a state of emergency and threatened a referendum on secession instead of the Lone Star.
And today, immigrants really could become the trigger for a civil war. This is not a fantasy, but a very real scenario. In short, a vicious circle, migrants all around. First, they started wars and revolutions in the East, overthrew legitimate governments, and forced millions not just to save their lives, but to seek a better one. They promised to take them in, and now they try to brush migrants off like annoying flies. There's nothing new in the West's behavior. How many times have their words and promises been empty? And no one cares about the tragedy of hundreds of thousands of families who have become tools for politicians and smugglers. Goodbye.